When I was a child in school, I remember learning about how stories were structured. One of the most common and most popular story structures is the three-act story. As a child, it was fascinating learning about and being able to recognize the parallels between many stories. Typically, these stories start with humble beginnings, a call to action, rising conflict, a climax, and eventual resolution of said conflict. This is a pretty standard narrative structure and is featured in many pieces of media from books to movies. This kind of story is thrilling and has an end that is easy to digest while simultaneously making us feel good. The events in these stories typically follow a similar pattern and have similar endings. But what if we took this structure and threw it out the window entirely? Recently, I went back and replayed the Dead Space remake. I never actually played the original, but when it was released, I fell in love with the remake. Oh, and spoiler warning ahead if you haven't played through it yet. The whole time I was playing through for the first time, I was expecting to find Nicole, have some great reunion, and make it out alive and well. Again, this structure is pretty common, but as you progress through the game, this overwhelming sense of dread starts to creep in as you begin to realize that things are not going to end well for Isaac. You begin to understand that Nicole is gone, Isaac is too late to rescue anyone, and no one is coming to save you. If you play the game all the way through, you know the ending. You kill the final boss and make your escape from the surface of Aegis 7 on a small craft. However, this ending is not entirely triumphant. As Isaac is floating away, he begins to play the last message that Nicole sent, the message that helped him hold on to hope in his darkest moments. But he stops right after opening it. The cutscene ends with Isaac looking over to the seat next to him and seeing a ghoulish vision of Nicole, who attacks him before the screen goes black. Maybe I became a little too immersed in this game, but I think the best media is the media that helps you feel for and connect with the characters. The first time I experienced this ending, I couldn't help but put myself in the shoes of Isaac. If I had just gone through the experience of fighting horrors beyond this world, seeing friends die, and holding on to hope that I could save one that I loved, just to be left, floating alone in the void of space, with horrific visions haunting me, I would feel utterly hopeless. Dead Space is only one of many examples of a story with an unhappy ending. Especially recently, there are many examples in fiction of endings that are less than savory. One other piece of media that often is known for its unhappy endings is the British television show Black Mirror. I'm sure that many of you have heard of or have seen this show for yourselves. Episodes of this show typically depict near-future technology and explore the ideas surrounding how these technologies could be used to the detriment of society. I have always taken the production of this show as a warning. While my interpretation could be wrong, I feel that these episodes are meant to be disturbing and unhappy for a very specific reason, to make us think before we innovate. These episodes, though disconnected, are united in purpose. It is easy to get caught up in the hype surrounding new technology. We have seen this recently with the popularization of AI. Every single marketing team in the world is currently focused on how they can make money by hyping up artificial intelligence, as if it was going to single-handedly cure cancer, solve homelessness, and fix all of our political issues. However, it seems that the story of AI has yet to have a conclusion, and it seems more and more every day that its ending might not be what we all expected. Black Mirror takes situations like this and dials them up to an 11. The situations in these episodes are usually far-fetched, but also not out of the realm of possibility either. The technology could certainly be seen as amazing and life-changing, but the show depicts these innovations as negative. This only serves to make the endings that much more unhappy. They end in such a way that it is conceivable that someone could experience them within our lifetime. This alone makes the show incredibly unsettling to experience and is a stark reminder that with every benefit technology brings us, it can also be used equally as effectively as a tool for destruction and suffering. While Dead Space is fiction, I still felt that I was able to relate to Isaac somewhat. Black Mirror brings this ability to empathize with the characters even closer to home. The episodes are set in cities that look exactly like where we live. The characters experience life in a similar way to how we do. It is easy to see how even you could have your story come to a similar end. So why is the three-act story such a popular story structure, And why do we often recoil from unhappy endings? Thinking back to the many stories I know of that employ this three-act story structure, I have come to the conclusion that it is because of our innate desire for resolution and closure. Our daily lives are typically filled with mundanity at best and suffering at worst. Very rarely do we experience true joy in our daily lives. Between responsibilities at home, to time spent at work, to school, we simply have to go through the motions that make up our existence. This, by extension, is why stories are so captivating in the first place. They take us to a reality beyond our existence. They transport us to a place that is entirely different from our own. This is also why we love happy endings. They give us something that we don't often experience in our own lives. I want you to think back to a recent time when you were upset or had a conflict. How did that situation end? If I had to guess, I would say that it either had no resolution and simply diffused, or it ended in such a way that you felt slighted or that you had gotten the short end of the stick. The conflicts in our lives don't usually end happy for us. Certainly, there are times when we have a conflict and it ends well, and everyone involved comes out feeling like they benefited. However, the vast majority of these events don't have a resolution, or the resolution is less than satisfactory. Most of the time, these conflicts are out of our control. Whether they came by the consequences of past actions, or they are simply random cosmic events that came together, we usually cannot do much to avoid these conflicts. This, I believe, lies at the heart of why we love stories with happy endings. The hero fights hard and comes out on top. They defeat the villain and they save the day. This feels good for us to see because it is something we don't often experience for ourselves. For the most part, we go through the fight. However, we almost never truly come out on top. This is exactly why we also have a hard time with stories that have unhappy endings. Despite often being fictional, they are a reflection of what we experience in our own lives. Instead of transporting us to a reality beyond our own, they bring us right back down to earth. While our conflicts don't often have the same existential dread attached, this is the root of the general unsatisfaction behind unhappy endings. Why do we need these unhappy endings? If all they do is make us feel like what we just went through wasn't worth it, what purpose do they serve? If they make us feel so unsatisfied, why do we have them in the first place? Well, from a narrative perspective, I think they are an extremely effective tool to keep your audience thinking about your work long after they experienced it. I mentioned earlier that happy endings are easy to digest. When I think about the happy endings I have seen, I have realized that I walk away and almost never think about the work at all. They typically are very surface level and require no extra thought. I don't think that this is a bad thing inherently. Most media is designed to be entertaining for a broad range of people, and many people escape to media to essentially just shut their brains off. I mean, how could people not do this? With how stressful and uncomfortable life can be, it is only natural to want to take a break and not have to think about what you are consuming. But if you want to make a piece of media that sticks with your audience, you need to make it deeper than just surface level. And one of the best ways to do this is with an unhappy ending. Because of how jarring it can be, the audience is left to ponder the meaning behind it. After completing Dead Space, I was stuck thinking about the implications of the ending for days. What if I lived in the world of Dead Space? If I had been a worker on the USG Ishimura, what would I do? How would I react? How would I cope with the trauma? These are questions that I think are not meant to really be answered. These are questions that are meant to be contemplated and pored over. A definitive answer is probably not necessary here. There is one more piece of media that I'm sure some of you are screaming at me to mention. How could I make a video about unhappy endings if I didn't mention The Mist? This story needs no introduction. If you haven't ever seen the movie, I would highly recommend that you go watch it for yourself. But for the uninitiated, The Mist tells a story about what happens when people are trapped in an unknown and tense situation. For most of the time, the characters are trapped in a grocery store in a town surrounded by a heavy mist. Anyone that ventures out into the mist is killed violently by monsters. Near the end of the movie, a group of survivors decides to try and venture out into the mist and get away. They make it to their car and attempt to make an escape. Despite their efforts, they run out of gas before making it out of the mist. The main character realizes that the gun he has been carrying has 4 bullets left, despite there being 5 people in the car, one of those being his 8-year-old son. In an act of mercy, he shoots everyone in the car besides himself. He then steps out of the car to be taken by the monsters. Out of the mist, he hears a noise and he sees a large figure. As he prepares for death, he realizes that it is not a monster, but a tank from the nearby military outpost. Upon seeing this, he breaks down sobbing. I know I just glossed over quite a lot of the movie, but I think you all get the idea. Now, I know that this ending is only in the movie, but I truly believe that in this one instance, the ending in the movie is actually better than in the book. Stephen King himself even endorsed this ending. While the story, even without this ending, can be very thought provoking, the movie version of the ending really cements it as one to remember. Looking back at these examples, the overwhelming question I can't get off my mind is, what was the point? Like, I can't help but think, why did I just sit through this whole movie or play through this whole game just for it to end like that? I would imagine that this initial gut reaction is actually pretty normal. When we go through something, it is nice to feel some amount of closure. But this is why I think unhappy endings are so good at helping us think about what we just experienced. When there is closure, it is very easy to just forget all about it and move on with your life. The lack of this closure makes us want to go through the events and try and analyze them to see where it all went wrong. This is exactly what I have found myself doing with all of these pieces of media. I typically think, how could I have changed the outcome knowing the ending? As unpleasant and unsatisfying as these endings are, I think we need to experience them every now and again. Whether they force us to examine our actions more closely, help us recognize what changes we want to see in our world, or simply remember a piece of media for longer, they are here to stay and make all the difference in certain pieces of media. They give us that crucial perspective that our lives need. Because after all, how would we understand that joy that comes from a happy ending if it weren't for the times where things don't go the way we picture? Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you all tuning into my first video. I know there were probably things that I could have done better, so if there are any suggestions that you guys have, make sure to leave them in the comments. I have a couple other videos coming up that I have in the plan, so if you do have any advice, make sure to leave it for me so I can, improve my skills and such. So thank you all and have a good one.